multi-faith coalition dialogue. My name is Kristin. My pronouns are she, they, and I am the Chief Diversity Officer here at SJSU. In this role, I serve as the Senior Diversity Officer of the institution and oversee the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. I also co-chair the Institutional Excellence Council, which recently convened a Interfaith Task Force. Interfaith Task Force full report and recommendations are now available on the ODEI website. But one of the things that we were interested in doing through this Interfaith Task Force is raising awareness about different religious, secular, and spiritual cultures and identities within our campus community. Recognizing that those identities are just as important and precious to us as race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and you name it. But for many people, religiosity and spirituality ends up being very private and very personal. But we understand that in order to be fully yourself and fully included in our campus community, we need to have space to embrace all of those identities. So this panel is part of that effort. The topic today, of course, is Day of Remembrance. And as part of our celebration, our remembrance activities, we are having this panel. The theme for today is Neighbors Not Enemies. Is that correct? Neighbors Not Enemies? And as I stated, religious and spiritual and secular identities, while they are deeply personal and private, they become public and quite contentious at times. So we were hoping today to have a conversation with some faith leaders within our the San Jose community and the greater community, talk about their experiences with bridging that gap and embracing what that means as they stay true to their own identities, as well as their parishioners or whoever might be in their congregations or under their stewardship, as well as how they work with one another. So we're gonna have an open dialogue today. I ask you to enter this space with genuine curiosity, to understand that these individuals, while they hold identities, they are not the keepers of that identity for all people. Do not speak for all people, they speak for themselves. But even those experiences and our little t truths have a meaningful impact on how we experience and see, and there's some truth in that. So we want to be able to share some of that wisdom and experience with you today. So without further ado, I'm going to actually have my panelists introduce themselves.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Reverend Steve Pinkston. I am an associate pastor at the New Beginnings Community Church on 5th Street, maybe a quarter mile from here.
Hi, I'm Dana Magat. I'm the rabbi at Temple Emanu-El. I've been in this community for 27 and a half years.
Father John Pedigo. I'm a Catholic priest. I don't represent all the Diocese of San Jose. I do not represent the Diocese of San Jose. I represent me. And I'm the executive director at PACT, People Acting and Community Together.
So I'm Bryan Frazen. I'm the pastor at Westminster Presbyterian Church for, I'm in my 15th year there.
Hi everyone, Zachary Markwith. I'm the Deputy Director at Intercultural Networks Group, or ING. Also, I'm a Muslim American. For those celebrating Ramadan starting today or yesterday, Ramadan Mubarak.
So thank you all. And actually, this might be the first question I have for each one of you. Can you tell me give me one sentence about what multi-faith work means for you personally?
Offering respect, appreciation, and having a willingness to work to a working relationship with other religious traditions.
For me, it's fulfilling my calling as a rabbi.
And for me, it's personal because I grew up Buddhist, became Catholic, and I consider myself a multi-perspective.
For me, it's the depth of understanding who I am by being able to understand who others are.
For me, it's embracing religious pluralism and peace through education and engagement with our neighbors, while simultaneously appreciating both our similarities and our differences.
That was a rainbow of answers. It was beautiful. Appreciate all of that. So for the first question, we're going to start in the middle, okay? Start in the middle and fan out here. So this is grounding us in our values and our lived experience. From your faith or your life experience, what core values guide how you relate to people who are different from you?
So I grew up, my mom was Japanese, and we grew up, and she grew up in Hawaii, so the big thing for us was talking story. So the most important part is you just, when you meet someone who says, where are you from, or, who are you? And you just talk about where your family's from, your ancestors, and you get to talk about what is meaningful to you. And what's meaningful to you is a relationship and a friendship and a kinship with other people. So I grew up with that value, is just trying to get to know someone else and being curious about somebody else. So my mom was someone that was really good about getting people to tell things and share their stories. So I think that's a huge value, is to be curious and get folks to talk and just be listening.
So kind of fundamentally, my story starts when I was a toddler in Des Moines, Iowa, and my mother was working with an organization called Self-Development People, and a woman in a little part of the town called Junction City. And Junction City got its name because that's where the Underground Railroad went. And from Junction City, people would go out across the country, but in the mid 70s, it still was in a very rough shape. And so she, an African-American woman, wanted to engage the community and do microloans to get businesses and to help people be able to put plumbing in their houses and things like that. And so I grew up going with my mother into that community and learning from that experience how much diversity, how much community is important, no matter where people are coming from, no matter what their background or faith traditions. And so we were in Presbyterian churches and historic Black congregations and other groups as I did that. And like even as a little kid, 5, 6 years old, I remember those experiences, and I think that started me off in how important being in community with people who are different from us is important and foundational.
I would say, as a Muslim, the core values are really compassion and mercy. The primary ways that God is understood in the Quran is through compassion and mercy. Every chapter of the Quran begins with the verse Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. And simultaneously, people, of course, are asked to not only venerate God as being compassionate, but reflect those qualities in their own actions. And so there are a number of sayings of Muhammad, including worship the compassionate or the merciful, feed people, and spread peace, and you'll enter paradise in peace. And so, I've seen these values in different contexts. I really came, I think, to interfaith work, to social justice work, to peace work, first through an organization called Food Not Bombs. And there were Catholic social workers and kids who were involved in the punk rock scene and hip hop. And everyone was just sort of coming together to instead of throwing away food, trying to share it with people.
Sure. In the Hebrew Bible, in the book of Genesis, there's this idea of B'Tselem Elohim, which means creating the divine image. That to me is one of the most important values we can have. When I look into your eyes, I should see the energy or feel the energy of God. And every person that we are in contact with, we should treat like that. The Dalai Lama, actually, when he was here in San Jose a long time ago, it was only about 10,000 of us. He actually had the clergy, like 600 of us, they were on the dais. And he actually referenced that also at one point, which I thought that was really cool. But he said something like, everyone that is in contact with you should be above you. And that's how you should look at them. And I think that is taking the B'Tselem Elohim to a next level. The idea that each person is, in fact, an aspect of God or part of God. And if I look at you that way, wouldn't I treat you differently? I think it's very important.
My great-grandfather was a Baptist minister. My grandfather was a Baptist minister. My father was a Baptist minister. I was ordained a Baptist minister. And I grew up with a prejudice against Catholics and Jews and Muslims. I had an awakening experience as an undergraduate student. I spent a semester studying abroad in Kenya, East Africa. And for the first 2 months while I was there, studying at the University of Nairobi in Kenya, I stayed at the Kenya Polytechnic Men's Hostel. And they served us breakfast and dinner each day. And I happened to develop a connection with 3 Muslim brothers, Rashid, Aziz, and Nasir. And we would talk daily and discuss our religious foundations and our beliefs, and I would listen and scratch my head because my learning up until that point had told me that you're going to hell. And I looked at their devotion to their religion. I looked at their following the tenets of Islam. I looked at them with their prayer rugs, praying 5 times daily. And I said, a loving, just, merciful God could not send these brothers who I love to hell. So my world started expanding, and then I started to realize that religious traditions across the board, whether you're talking about Islam, whether you're talking about Judaism, whether you're talking about Buddhism, whether you're talking about Christianity, we all have something that that embraces, if you will, the golden rule. Whether it was Muhammad, whether it was the Torah, whether it was the Dalai Lama, we all have something that embraces and reflects the golden rule. And so I had to toss my earlier prejudices out the window and start opening my eyes and ears and heart to others.
So I want to pick up off of what you just shared, Pinkston, because it sounds to me that you had a moment where your beliefs and possibly your values were challenged.
Absolutely.
And I want to unpack that for you all because you've got a wealth of experience. Can you talk about a moment in life when the values, some of the values that you just shared, were challenged or tested? And what did you learn from that moment?
Where do you want to start?
I think that I want to start with Zachary because he's deep in thought.
Yeah.
That's Zachary anyway, though.
I mean, every day in interpersonal relations, we want to be compassionate, we want to be merciful, and then, we end up arguing with family, with coworkers. But I think when we look at what's happening in the world right now, specifically detention of, Latino and Hispanic immigrants, people of other cultures, people from East Asia, from the Arab world, and so on, that's very upsetting. So also those, how do you interact with those who profit from war? How do you interact with politicians? It's very clear that they're abusing women and children. What is it to be compassionate and merciful towards them? I think we have to speak the truth. And stand up against those who are harming others.
Come on down.
Bring it on down.
Bryan.
Yeah, it's hard because you can go through so many times. In my tradition, we recognize that no moment is forever, and that you will continue to have these moments that challenge you, and it's through the challenging that you begin to grow. So I can think of, the stories that popped in my head was, when I was in seminary and we went to Geneva, Switzerland, And I had grown up in a situation where my grandfather had been abused in a Catholic orphanage. And so being Catholic was pure evil. That was what our family was. And we were staying in a Catholic guest house and being hosted by these priests. And we were sitting there, and we were in Geneva, Switzerland, so we were drinking a couple bottles of wine. And I was drinking wine with this priest, and we kind of went back and forth, and I told him the story of, how what had happened to my grandfather, and how, I have this kind of visceral thing through those stories towards the Catholics. And he went and he told me his story, and kind of shared, and sharing that wine, sharing that time with each other, those walls kind of broke down, and he didn't apologize or make what happened to my grandfather right, but he helped me to recognize that what happened to my grandfather was an isolated incident in that situation, that didn't represent all of these people. And early on in my ministry, that was a really foundational kind of thing of remembering that we can't label everything the same, that we have to see each person individually, and even if they carry certain things back behind them, whether they're Catholic or Presbyterian or whatever, you can't label them by their group. You have to see them for who they are as an individual and lift that up. And so that was, of my many times, that was one of those times that really changed and challenged them.
I guess for me, it's because I grew up in a multiracial, multi-faith household. My dad was like a Southern Baptist, and my mom was Buddhist, and so they got a Catholic. And so, but the big value is, again, my mom was about talking story, and so it's really about getting to know somebody else. And in that idea of an encounter, and Pope Francis called the encuentro, the encounter between people that were both parties are mutually transformed. That value I've held for forever. And then Trump got elected the first time, and then that was the first time it really, leading up to his election, was very difficult. A lot of my dad's family, the white family, kind of defriended me on Facebook, and so the big Jesus people, Protestant Jesus, and so they were very, very, very angry about my stuff and what I would be posting. And I think what I thought that we lived in a safe community here in Santa Clara County, and that was where we could really talk and try to understand the differences. That was challenged when I was at the YMCA on the Alameda exercising, and some guy was in the locker room, some old Anglo guy was there, and he just started making these jokes and was imitating Chinese people, the language, right, that kind of stuff, and there was all these older Asian guys, Vietnamese guys, and a couple of Chinese guys on the other side. They're kind of talking to each other, and they just got really quiet, and this guy's very loud and telling this not a funny joke. And I remember just sitting there, and I wanted to say something, but I felt all of a sudden I felt myself emotionally regressing to when I was a kid, when at schools you're saying you're a chink or you're a nip. And I didn't know what those words were because I never heard them growing up. And so I had to ask my mother what that was. And she told me. And then I said, why are they saying that? What makes it say that? Because we didn't grow up that way. We'd spent summers in Hawaii where everyone was mixed, and we were the odd ones, right? And so I don't know. It just took me to that place of feeling powerless, and that has always bugged me. And I have a challenge meeting people that have deep prejudice and deep hatred, and part of this Magat movement is very, very difficult to engage and theologically engage and pastorally engage people who are so fundamentally, who want my erasure, who don't believe in my parents, being married and who I am as a person. I find that to be very difficult to live in the value that I thought I grew up with and I thought embraced.
Wow. This is a tough one for me, I have to be honest. I probably would have had a different answer a decade ago.
Can you give us both answers?
Yeah, I will actually. Sure. I'm a rabbi, I give you 48 answers. I think I'll start earlier. In my career earlier, I was very blessed in my seminary. I'm a Reformed rabbi, so we're the largest movement of Judaism in the world and the most progressive. So in Los Angeles, where I was at school, and then I ended up going to Cincinnati after to finish, in Los Angeles, we were part of a group, Black Jewish Dialogue, and we would go up to the hilltop with beautiful camp in the Malibu Mountains, and we did a weekend. We did it every year, and we built wonderful relationships. And for me, it was great because it wasn't just, if you will, Baptist. We dealt with all kinds of religions from the Black African American community. And there was one person there who was Muslim who I talked with, and he was kind of angry to be there. I'll be honest. He wasn't happy to be there, and he carried a lot of pressures with him. And I remember when I was, I was ordained and then went on, had my first pulpit in Miami. I'm in San Diego, come up here, and 9/11 happens. And I was nervous about what do I do here? Because my heart told me I need to reach out to the Muslim community and bring them in, because what they were going through for the president at the time was horrific. And I felt this calling to do that. And I connected with a local imam who's still in the area, and we're still really good friends. We go out to lunch and we're connected. Tahir Anwar is an imam in the community. And Tahir and I became actually very close pretty quickly. But at 9/11, that night of 9/11, we had a service at our synagogue, and I invited Tahir and PJ, the bishop of San Jose, who was my dear friend of blessed memory. And they came, and we did this amazing experience. And from that, every year, we would do an annual event that blossomed into Civic. Civic started from our group. Civic is an umbrella organization. We're supposed to be at least. It's now more educational. I don't do much in this community. I'm not very involved with them at this point. But for me, pushing myself out of my comfort zone, because this earlier experience was really important. So that's one piece. The other piece that I'm having a really hard time with is the world's defining me as a person out there right now. I'm a progressive Zionist. And the word Zionism is so disgustingly misinterpreted and misunderstood that I have to say, when people misuse it, I have to move beyond that misuse and still look at them with that same idea of B'Tselem Elohim, that they are in the image of God. And it's been hard for me. And like John, I will say, being around trumpets at times, those that support this president, has been very hard for me to be in dialogue with at times, because it feels like we're not able to have a deeper, like, real conversation, that it's very pedantic at times. It seems very black and white, and that's just not my world. I'm all about layers, being curious, asking questions, right? So I would say for me, that's probably the hardest thing right now, and I haven't worked it out, to be honest. I'm still in that space because the world's defining me, and I think to be able to move beyond that and to be in relationship with people that look at you from that general place and not from just being Dana is very hard for me. And I have to push through that. And I think that's one of the kind of the pieces here, is that in order to really do any of this work, we have to push beyond our comfort. We have to be able to take our curiosity, I think, on some deep level and really go with that. And I actually think the inner child works well for us. If we have the curiosity of that inner child always and asking the questions. I love religions in general. I was a religious studies major at undergraduate. I love studying with it. I love religions because I think we're all trying to do the same thing. In the end, we're trying to create meaning in our life. We're trying to punctuate our lives with a sense of holiness. And in the end, we also know we want to be in community, and not just with people that look the same or have the same religion, but with our people, which is everyone. And I think that's actually what we all have in common from our religious faith. Very much what Reverend Pinkston said before, that we all come, we have a lot of similarities in faith. And this to me is one of the most important ones. It's that curiosity. It's moving beyond those that seemingly don't like you because they don't know you. And they have that ignorance. Can I move beyond that ignorance to actually educate? Are they curious enough to do that? Can I create that energy by which maybe that would create more curiosity for them?
You see why I love this guy. Two stories. I love, Dana, the fact that you said that we have to move beyond our comfort zone. I was a high school educator for 43 years. The last 40 of those years was at a Jesuit high school, Bellarmine College Prep here in San Jose. When I first got to Bellarmine Prep, I said to myself, all right, I'm going to go to the masses. It's required for faculty. But no. I will not listen. I will not learn. You can't teach me anything. How naive, how shallow. And the longer I stayed, the more I started to meet and understand the priests who were there. That they loved God like me. That they wanted to be charitable and giving and concerned about others like me. And so, again, my world was challenged. My world started to open up. Let me share another story. I moderated the Black Student Union at Bellarmine for 35 years. And each year we would always get some kind of t-shirt or sweatshirt that reflected, who we are, our culture, aims that we had. And one year, probably 20 years ago, we had a committee that was charged with designing the shirt, researching costs for the shirt, and bringing all that material back to the union. And they gave us the design. Everybody loved it. They told us the cost. Most people loved it. And one guy, I won't call his name out because his father's pretty prominent in the community. One guy said, "That's too high. We have to Jew them down."
Oh.
Yikes.
And I said, "Excuse me, what did you say?" He said, "We have to Jew them down. The price is too high." I said, "That is racist. That is not reflective of what we want to happen in our community. We don't want people degrading or demeaning us as Black people. We're not going to degrade Jews, Muslims, Buddhists, any other group. That's wrong. You need to apologize now." "No, I won't." I said, "You need to apologize now, or else you're leaving this room." "I'm not going to apologize." I said, "You will not attend another," he was a sophomore, "You will not attend another BSU meeting until you come back and are willing to apologize to the group because what you said, your tone was wrong." He did not come back to a meeting for the next 3 years, sophomore, junior, senior year. He and I have had opportunities to talk and for me to challenge him. And he's working at the school now. He's working at the school now in DEI.
All right.
Amazing. So change can happen.
There you go.
Development can happen, but I was enraged by his insensitivity at the time.
That's a moment. Okay. And as a DEI practitioner, we do not know it all and we make mistakes. So I'm just going to leave it at that. So I'm going to shift ever so slightly. And all of you have answered a piece of this question already. But I want us to make it explicitly and tie it back to the theme of the day. Othering, fear, and responsibility. So the incarceration of Japanese Americans was fueled by fear, misinformation, and dehumanization. We are seeing a similar pattern right now, right before our faces. What responsibility do faith leaders and faith communities have when fear or hatred is directed at another group? And what does showing up actually look like? Am I starting with you, Rabbi? Go ahead. That's
So we'll go back to 9/11. One of the things, I'm sure most of you probably weren't around then, but one of the things that happened was the sect community was under fire in America because of the fact that they wore seemingly it was a hijab, but it wasn't. and they were under fire. There was a killing, I think it was Arizona, at a gas station.
Yeah.
And when that happened, our synagogue reached out to the local Sikh community and the Muslim community and said, our women will walk with your women when you go shopping. And we started this program of our women in our synagogue being with those women whenever they go shopping, whenever they're out in the street, so they would have support and all that. So I think that would be an example of the kind of work we need. And I'll give you another example, which is 4 of us here. I'd love to have you join us once in a while. But the 4 of us actually are 4 of 6 who founded a interfaith group called the Silicon Valley Faith Leaders Collaborative. We all have problems remembering. I think I named it too. But yeah, so confusing. This began with a conversation, this group. Things were happening in our country that was getting, and beer, of course, but things were happening in this country that were very scary. And I am a member, a fellow, as a few of us are here, of American Leadership Forum, ALF. And we were trained in collaborative leadership. I think it's the best way to put it. And I went back to my ALF leadership and said, look, I'd like to start an interfaith group that we could start dialoguing about some of the issues that are happening. The biggest issue to me at the time was we're doing all this other stuff but not dealing with the unhoused. In this community, the numbers were staggering. The numbers of San Jose State were not represented. We had about 2,000 to 4,000 kids here that would literally surf couch to couch. They should be counted those numbers, and they were never counted in those numbers.
Sleeping in their cars.
Sleeping in their cars, exactly. And so for me, it felt like we needed to address this unhoused issue in a real way. And so John and I were the last 2 chairs of now something that doesn't exist, that my former emeritus rabbi of blessed memory, and someone almost the same to him, created the Silicon, which was Santa Clara Interfaith Council on Economic Justice. We were the last 2 chairs of it, and we kind of shuttered it, closed it, because it was part of another, let's just say it was part of other organizations. We wanted to have our own freedom. And so I went to the PACT leader, and we met too, and we decided, the 6 of us, Nancy Palmer-Jones, who's not here, as well as Ray, to create an organization that would start addressing some of these bigger issues. Well, Trump was elected, and things started getting really bad. The Black Lives Matter movement was getting really, really strong, and there was some controversy in terms of the Jewish community about whether or not they would accept Jews, because we are people of color. We're not this color. In this country, we're a lot this color, but we're actually people of color. In Israel, we're mostly people of color, and in the world. So anyway, so I want to move this along and let others people speak.
So that's is another dialogue. Put a pin in that. Our next dialogue.
But I think the goal was for us was to create a group that would respond to what was happening, and that's what needs to happen. That we have to work together. When the Muslim community is under fire, and they were well under fire before the Jewish community, since I've been here, we're under fire. It was our responsibility, our obligation, to, if you will, stand with them. But it's about relationship, isn't it? In the end, we're all more connected when we have a relationship. And so that's what we're really about, is building relationships. And so our synagogue with Abrahamic Alliance, we actually have done all kinds of tikkun olam, social action activities with Evergreen Mosque and a local church. And by building that relationship, our congregants and the congregants from Evergreen have become really connected and doing work together. And I think that's what happens. You build relationship, and that's the best way to respond to what's happening around us. Because when we work together, we're stronger than any hate is out there.
I think that the biggest threat that I think we have, as faith leaders, is the white Christian nationalism. And I don't think that is obviously not a new thing. A country that's founded on, genocide of the native peoples and the enslavement of others, and then, yeah.
What is white Christian nationalism?
What is white Christian nationalism? It is a belief that Christianity and race are united together, and that it is to be understood as kind of a normative, kind of North Star of what this nation should be. And so they created a mythology around the standard or normative or the highest form of Americanism is Christianity tied to white race. And that when you hold white Christian nationalism up to the microscope, or you put some lights on it, you see that it we could say that it has its roots. People say it's in desegregation, but it's actually much deeper than that. I mean, the genesis of it came out of a belief that we're bringing something to these poor people that don't have anything. We're bringing them salvation. We're bringing them something. It's my first cousin in Hawaii, all Asian, Japanese kids and Chinese kids, and they're all in this class, and it's in the University of Hawaii, big lecture, and the professor asks them to say, what is the most important thing in your life? And so Hali girl, white girl from Texas, who was going to the school, said salvation is the most important part. There's kind of a quiet in the room. And so my cousin turns to the other person next to her, who was also Asian and Buddhist. They said, what's salvation? Why is it so important? And which I think, like, what is it? And for non-Christians, it's kind of like, what is that word about? Because we're already saved. What's a big deal about that? But I think that, but white Christian nationalism has a certain imposition that places itself over all other religions, there's nothing new to teach, there's nothing new to learn, and there's all this presumption. So that's a very long way to explain it. But what I was saying, that I think for me, I think one of the things in terms of interfaith leaders of how we get tested in this is that my family were not incarcerated because they were in Hawaii, and they were farm workers in the cane fields, and you need to do that for the money. If you incarcerate people in Hawaii, no one would be working in the fields. No one would do pineapple, no one would do cane. So everyone's still there, except all the professionals were all moved away. So our family that we married into family that was incarcerated. But every Japanese person, we learn about what othering is. That's something we learned in second grade. My brother was dark skin, black hair, brown eyes, very skinny, and everyone said, he looks Puerto Rican or Filipino. He doesn't look anything like you. They would say, because I was the haole looking, the real white one on the outside. So it is funny because my mom and dad had to talk to him about driving, because at that time kids are driving fast. A lot of kids are Filipino kids, Mexican kids that are in Daly City or what are those things where you go real fast in your cars. I was a nerdy brother. My brother was into motorcycles and weed and all that stuff. I tended not to do that. I didn't do it. And so, but my brother was getting in trouble, but because he didn't appear white, my dad said, you just should be careful when the police are stopping. Because they're stopping. His best friend is a Filipino guy that was very dark skinned, and then all that stuff. So the othering is very clear. So I grew up on that same sense, not as my black friends had to talk to their kids, but I could see that there was a difference of how you appeared outside. And you just grew up with stories. My mom, would talk about when she went out to the workforce, in a white workforce, how she was treated differently. And so you hear that kind of stuff. My dad would have a very different perspective about it, and they would fight about it. And I remember going to the DeYoung Museum to see the Japanese internment exhibition. I was in second grade, my brother was in first grade, and we went there to see it. And we came back, worked at the dining table talking about it, and my dad was furious that my mom would take us there because he says they're too young to understand. And my mom says, well, look at your kids, and we weren't too young. I just remember I remember the exhibit, but I also remember the argument at the dining room table about were we too young to understand what had happened. So othering has just been part of it. And I think that white Christian nationalism tries to erase that uncomfortable part of history. And it wants to make everything look great, and we're all great Americans, and that's not the truth. And when you allow religion to be a kind of a veneer of legitimacy, that to me is an affront to who I am as a clergy professional person in this business.
Yeah, well, so the Presbyterian Church was founded by a politician, and which is all, when you get into things like white Christian nationalism and things like that, I like to kind of start there because John Calvin was a politician. Calvinism comes out of that. But it also was the strongest of any Protestant tradition to have a separation between church and state, between government, because John Calvin recognized that once religion and government were put together, the only abuse could happen. And so a lot of the reform movement is a reaction to the way in which the church and government use their power to abuse people. And so, in my tradition, there is a lot of emphasis that we have looking at the privilege of our positions. Presbyterian Church is a very educated, denomination, and mostly a white denomination. And so there is a lot of privilege that comes with that. When for me growing up, the church was always a safe place. But I was in a unique situation also because I'm gay. And for me, listening to stories of other gay and lesbian folks through seminary and through life, I recognized how the church had pushed them out. I was lucky in my position, or in the church where I grew up, because I may not have been fully accepted in my family, and that's a whole other thing. But within the church, I could always kind of put down my walls and kind of be present and all of that, and all of that. So it was a really kind of remarkable place. But that tension between being able to be passing as a straight white man in the world, but also recognizing that I am not a fully accepted person in a lot of circles. It works kind of within that to recognize the power of privilege and how me as an individual has to kind of see where my privilege is going to step on somebody else and where my persona can be overbearing sometimes. But it's also interesting, and this was a thing that happened about 8 years ago, when I was a delegate to one of our national meetings. And I was sitting next to an African-American woman from Alabama. And she kept wanting to speak in our committee meeting. And she kept going to speak, and they just didn't call on her. And of course, I have no filter, and I just speak.
That'd be true.
And that happens. So finally, she kind of goes like this to me and passes me a note and said, "Can you say this for me?"
Oh my God.
And I'm like, I don't want to say your words. And so I got to stand up in that meeting and say, "Hey, she wants to talk. Let her talk." And she was a little embarrassed, but she was able to say it for herself and looked at me and I think it was one of those moments that I could have overdone my privilege by speaking for her and reading that note for her. I recognized that I needed to use my privilege to bring awareness to somebody I needed to speak. And I think that's the difficult thing of being in a position of power, is the question of how to use that power. And being gay, one of the biggest things that we have in our community is the importance of people telling their own stories. That's why it's so offensive when somebody outs somebody else. It's because, it's bad to out somebody else, but it really is more about you're now telling their story. And that's even worse than outing somebody, because you're taking that away from them. You're taking their agency away. You're taking their personness away, because now they are just becoming a label. They are just becoming set aside. You've taken their humanity away. And so that's kind of how I see othering and kind of how we react to that.
Yeah, I think there's really, we take a example from the Japanese American community to follow Rabbi Dana after 9/11, who showed up for Muslim Americans and Arab Americans. There were calls to detain and deport so many of us, and because of the experience during the internment camps, many Japanese Americans stood up, and then shortly thereafter we saw a number of Christians and Jews. So I think faith leaders need to be responsive. In this moment, I would say one of the things that's most urgent is certainly standing up to the Trump administration, to ICE, as we saw many faith leaders do in Minnesota, and we know that it's coming with greater force here in California. So we need to be prepared. But I think we're also kind of looking at the effect, because we know that the administration, just wants to sort of create chaos in Venezuela, in Iran, here in the U.S. We really need to look at who are his donors. Many of them are here in Silicon Valley. Peter Thiel, even OpenAI.
Yep.
They're the top donors of that administration. So we need to be thinking of the connection, between, basically, Martin Luther King was very clear about this. Poverty, racism, and war, right?
Yeah.
And I think that remains true right now.
My guess is that some of you have heard of the Christian biblical story where Jesus shares about the Good Samaritan who responded sensitively and compassionately to a Jew who was in distress, to a Jew who had considered him an enemy, to a Jew that he considered a neighbor. Neighbor is not restricted to proximity, the person that lives across the street or next door to me. Neighbor is not restricted to a racial bond or a nationality. Martin Luther King said years ago, the true neighbor is the one who will risk his or her position, will risk his or her prestige, and will even risk his or her life for the welfare of others. That's a challenge, but a challenge that I embrace. There's a Jesuit priest in Southern California, Father Greg Boyle, who operates Homeboy Industries, and they do several things. They do job training, they remove folks' tattoos on former gang members, they try to bring reconciliation with former gang members, and he says it's all about kinship. Kinship. Everyone, he says, belongs, and everyone has inherent dignity. And we all need to recognize that, appreciate that, and promote that.
How do I sum that up? Like, just such amazing thoughts and perspectives and experiences you've all shared. Looking at the time, I am not going to turn it to the audience. I know you probably have questions. I'm so sorry. But they're going to do a podcast on, and then we'll do some type of Q&A thing with the podcast, right? Right. So, but on a serious note, what I would love for you to share is a parting word with us. And that sounds so religious. A parting word. Not a benediction. But Send us with peace. Let me go ahead and go back into that benediction and step into that. Give us some inspiration, because you're faith leaders, and that's what we look to, leaders, on how we navigate this world with so much hatred and othering and fear-mongering right now. A parting word, what do we do right now?
Christian scripture tells me to not get weary in well-doing, not get weary in doing the right thing. So, as an educator for so many years, I would end my emails and correspondences with 2 words, simply press on.
Steve
Press-
press on.
Press on.
Press on.
Press on?
I think it's part of your life experience too, literally. There are more people that are good than not. I have tremendous hope for our people. I really do. I'll be honest, after 10/7 and what happened in Israel, if it wasn't for my buddies here, I don't know if I would have gone through it. Because they got the nuance, because we had already talked about all this stuff. They got the nuance. They also got my emotions. And they were able to let me just be myself and to cry and to feel what I needed to feel, and my anger towards Netanyahu and his response and all that stuff. They were able to really be there in such a beautiful way. It's all about relationships. Build the relationships. Get out of your comfort zone and introduce yourself to someone you don't know, someone that looks weird to you maybe. Get so out of that comfort zone, because you'll see they're not weird at all. They're just like you and me. We're all B'Tselem Elohim. We're all creating the divine image. And if we actually treat each other that way, we got this. This Trumposaurus, he's gonna go, man. We got 3 years to get through. He won't last it, but we got 3 years to get through this. We can do it. But we have to stay in community. We have to stay in coalition. We have to be able to be curious with each other and lean in.
In Catholic theology, we have a belief that's called the existential, the belief of the that we're created at the very core of our being to be curious about the divine, to look for the divine, that we have that in us to look, but the world teaches us to forget who our inner being is, what our inner being is. Our inner being is to see the goodness of which we're created and to remember that, but we do forget. There's an amnesia that happens. There's a lot of terrible things that make us forget, and so we forget that we're created good, and we also forget that the other person's also created good. So we tend to remember maybe the last thing that someone said to us, that person doesn't belong here. That person isn't good enough, or that person shouldn't do that. You shouldn't love that person. But I think that if we spend the time to recover the belief of the internal goodness and divine that we have inside ourselves, my hope is that you will also see that divine spark in other folks and just allow that to happen without tons of thought, without tons of stuff, but just to sit with that belief that we are created in original blessing.
Getting among friends, I will say, when you look at our government, whether Republican or Democrat, you also recognize that the top candidates on the Republican side and the top candidates on the Democrat side are both being funded by the same technology companies, all of whom have the objective of isolating people from one another, to say you are this and that defines you and you need to stay within your group. As people, our goal, our need is to interact with other people. Finding people who are different from us, finding people who come from a different background, come from a different faith, come from that, helps us all to grow and to be stable and to listen and to really create a healthy community. When we isolate ourselves, we can't be a healthy community. We can only fight one another. When we come together, we can listen and we can grow and we can make a difference in everybody's life.
Truth. From a sort of the Quranic perspective, diversity is not only something that people are supposed to tolerate, but it's divinely willed. Racial diversity, linguistic diversity, but also religious diversity. There's a number of verses that are quite clear about this. We've given each of you a law in a way, had we willed, we could have made you one people, but we willed otherwise. So vie with one another in that which in you've been given, and you'll all sort of return to God, and he will tell you wherein, or she or it will tell you wherein ye differ. So religious diversity is providential from my reading of that. And, those who want to impose sort of, one religion, one race, one perspective, they're really going against, in my view, what's sort of natural, which is that we're all different, and different divine disclosures, different faces of the divine, as Rabbi Dan has mentioned. And I would add to all of that, just briefly, we can't let those in power to whether it be political power or media power to define our realities. We sort of have the ability to do that, and I think part of that is unplugging, part of that is creating media, part of that is spending time alone in community, praying, meditating, so that we sort of bring forth our inner gifts, our inner genius, and ultimately, God willing, peace and justice.
Well, panelists, this has been phenomenal. Thank you. Audience, you have been great. Thank you all. Thank you for staying.
You have to leave.